Hello and welcome everybody to Alabama Care. I am your host today, Antwain Jordan. We're actually going to go over a special topic that's going to continue on for probably the next 2 or 3 weeks. What we're actually going to go over is service animals. That's what today's lesson is about. It's going to be an introduction to service animals. So recently, with everything that's kind of come up with my move, as you guys are aware of, I've recently got my dogs certified as an emotional support animal. And I wanted to just kind of like shed some light to what that actually means, and let you guys know the different types of service animals there are out there. Um, so we've got three different types of service animals that are out there. You have a support animal. A support animal is a working animal that's trained in at least two or three more tasks that actually help the disabled person or persons involved. Those kinds of disabilities can range from anything from hearing to medical alerts to mobility issues, autism, psychiatric issues, um, and any other medical elements that a service animal can provide to make that job easier for you if you're disabled or handicapped. You have another type of support animal, which is called a support animal. That's what my dog's classified as. Puka is classified as a support animal. These types of animals are considered companion animals, um, which help cope with challenges related to emotional or mental health conditions. In my instance, and for a lot of y'all's instances as well, um, being a parent or single parent with a medically complex care child or taking care of somebody else who has a it can be very taxing on yourself. And having, for me and for Mateo even, having Puka as our support animal in regards to our companion animal really means a lot. It helps bring that bit of mental health issues that may stem up or may come up, um, to kind of help there. She's always there to help. Like, she can sense like when I'm anxious or Mateo's anxious or my daughter's anxious, and she just likes to cuddle. That's her big thing. She wants to just come over there and lay down on you and let you know everything that's okay. So that's how they can kind of help with some emotional or mental health conditions. Typically, a support animal is not trained in to perform specific tasks, and I know I've mentioned that earlier. So some of y'all are wondering, like, well, what kind of specific tasks? Service animals can be trained to get things out of the dryer because they may be in the back of the dryer. You're unable to grab them. They're able to, if you are wheelchair bound, uh, actually be taught to guide you, and you just kind of like steer them in the direction that you want to go, but they can pull your wheelchair. Some of these tasks that they can be performed can alert other individuals when they're having seizures. Uh, uh, Another one in regards to mobility that I have seen in a couple of the videos that I've been reviewing, um, is being able to help them get in and out of chairs or beds or object. I've seen them use like tug ropes that they would hold on to, allow the person to kind of pull themselves up. So they're just some of the different tasks that they can be tasked with. And support animals typically aren't tasked to do those kind of jobs. They're really just kind of there as your companion to kind of help calm mental health or emotional issues that you may be having. And then most of you guys are probably aware of this type of dog, but just didn't know that there was a classification for it. But you also have therapy animals. So for any of you who have gone to hospitals, especially a children's hospital, and have stayed for any length of period of time, you'll notice that every now and then they'll have these individuals that come around with dogs. These dogs are typically classified as therapy animals. Their job is to not only just serve the people that are their trainers or their owners, but they're there to service anybody that they can reach. As they're going patient room to patient room to kind of provide that smile, that sense of comfort, that sense of well-being. These therapy dogs will come in and kind of just help lighten the day. Uh, Most therapy dogs volunteer at places such as hospitals, long-term facilities, treatment centers, schools, and other places that people can benefit the need of having a therapy dog there. Uh, uh, but the difference between the three animals that I had mentioned before, so you've got the service animals. These are service animals are actually protected underneath the ADA guidelines. And for those of you who don't know what ADA stands for, ADA stands for, I apologize, I did not write this down. ADA stands for uh, Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990. Is what that is about. So Americans with Disabilities. And with a service dogs are meant to pretty much go everywhere that we as people are allowed to go to. I mean, this means in and out of restaurants, grocery stores, airplanes. They're to be treated more like humans than to be actually service dogs or as a pet. And so, with these certain rights and privileges that you have when having a service dog, you can't be turned away because you have a pet in a place that considers to have a no pet policy. Uh, there are a lot of places out there that have a no pet policy, but because you have a service animal, you're allowed to go in there with your service animals. Therapy animals and support animals are at the discretion of the owners or those establishments, unfortunately. So, in order for you to have your rights protected underneath the ADA in regards to having a service animal, um, they need to be certified through the state of Alabama with a certification that shows them as being a support animal. Therapy animals and support animals, uh, you can still take them to a lot of places, such as hotels, other lodging establishments. But generally, what you want to make sure when you're taking your support animal or your therapy animal is that they actually have pets allowed policy. Um, in places that don't allow pets because they're not protected, support animals and therapy animals are protected underneath the ADA. They actually have a right to tell you that you or your dog cannot come in here to this establishment. So those are some of the main differences with that. One of the great things about having either a service dog, a support animal, or a therapy animal that I have come to find out recently is that you can't be charged a fee on any one of those. So even those service animals, you can only you're allowed to get in everywhere. Um, with a support animal therapy animal, if you're allowed, say you're able to talk an establishment that doesn't typically allow pets to allow a pet in, they cannot charge you a pet charging fee or like a $15 day fee for taking care of a pet because you have a dog that performs an action or a comfort to you verified by a letter. Now, you can get any physician or any counselor or like a therapist or a psychiatrist to write what they call an ESA, which is a letter that explains that you have an emotional support animal. And that's pretty much all the verification and proof that you need to have with you to be able to kind of bypass some of those places or rules where you're not allowed to have pets without having to pay a fee. So recently, with getting Puka certified as an ESA, and us being on our transition move, the hotel that we're at is not charging us for the nominal $15 a day pet fee. So that's a really great thing. And one of my favorite things that I just recently learned about too as well was the Fair Housing Act. For some of y'all who do not know what the Fair Housing Act is, it just protects those individuals when working with landlords or agencies or rental companies or apartment complexes. It protects them from being not only biased to you and your disability, but also service animals. So if you have an ESA or an emotional support animal, or if you have a TSA or a therapy support animal, or you have an ADA service animal dog, what the Fair Housing Act does is allows you to be able to get into these places where typically pets are not allowed or in that deposit fee. It allows you to get into rental properties or apartments without having to worry about what am I going to do with my pet. You can't be turned away for having an ESA when you're working with like a rental property or an apartment complex, but on things like hotels, extended stays, or Airbnbs, because they're not considered like a forever home, then these tenants do have a right to turn you away. But if you're looking to move, and you're worried about them charging you some astronomical pet fee, or them telling you no, they cannot turn you away if you have any one of those service animals. So support service or therapy animals. So it's really a great thing to use when you're looking at getting ready to move in the future, is to not have to worry about whether or not your companion go to. So one of the key things I want you guys to take away from this as well is an animal or several rules that provide you with a sense of well-being while caring for your significant other that may have disabilities, your child that has disabilities, and they have a pet. They're worried about they're already grandfathered in because they don't want to lose their pets. They can get their physician, so their family doctor, or a licensed counselor, therapy, or psychiatrist to write a letter classifying them as a service animal, allowing them to worry stress free when moving with their dog if they're having to move to another apartment complex or rental property. Um, so that's one of the great things I've learned about the fair. It covers a lot of other things, but in this specific segment in regards to service animals, you're protected underneath that, even though you're not protected underneath ADA to bring your pet, your companion animal everywhere with you. Um, let's see, let me make sure that I'm not missing any questions from the lobby. All right, perfect. So no questions. And so as far as the ADA's rules and guidelines go, if you have an ADA dog, they are allowed in hotels and other lodging establishments, public transportations, terminals, depots and stations, restaurants and other places that serve food and drink, um, sales or rental establishments, like we discussed earlier, service establishments, so any kind of place that provides a service, or any place of public gathering, such as an auditorium or a convention center. Um, Places of entertainment and exhibit, like theaters, sports stadiums, museums, even, or like the zoo. You can take them to gyms, bowling alleys. So as you can see, pretty much anywhere that you can go, you can take your service dog as long as it's ADA certified to be a service dog. Um, Now, some of you out there who have service animals already know that, you know, if you have a service dog, they can't tell you, they can't ask you, what your disability is, but disabilities are, but they can ask you three different questions to identify whether or not your dog qualifies as a service dog or therapy dog or an emotional support dog that they're willing to accept into their establishment. Um, One of the questions they can ask is, um, they can ask if the trainer or owner trainer with a disability or qualified trainer is, or excuse me, it says if a trainer is an owner trainer with a disability or a qualified trainer with at least 1 year's experience in training animals. So, um, essentially asking if the animal was trained by owner, or do you have a license as a trainer to declare this person as a service animal. They can ask that question. Um, they can ask for photo identification stating that the trainer is an employee, a volunteer agent, or a graduate of a school for seeing, eye, hearing, service, or guide dogs, or an organization generally recognized by agencies involved in the rehabilitation of people with disabilities as a reputable and competent to provide dogs with training, who's actually involved with the training process. So what that long and summed up saying is just saying they can ask for an ID, for those claiming to be trainers, whether it be self-trained or an agency, to verify proof, in regards to acknowledging that this your dog is a service animal. And they can ask what task does the animal is the animal being trained to perform, and if the trainer is currently engaged in the training of the animal. So essentially, when you go up to these places and you tell them that you've got a service animal, um, that they can't ask you what's your disability, why do you need this dog. There's very few guidelines, the few questions they can ask, and those are the only three questions certified by ADA that they are allowed to ask, is essentially a person's ID, so therefore they can verify, or a certificate proving that they are a trainer. They can ask if the um, trainer has at least 1 year's worth of experience, and what the tasks are performed to do. They are not allowed to ask anything about the person's disability. Um, what's something I learned recently about service animals? So actually, one of the most amazing things I've learned about service animals, in my opinion, is that they are not limited to dogs. So one thing that you've probably heard or noticed throughout the segment is that I've mentioned service dog once or twice, and that's because of an interesting fact that I had found out. So if I can pull up that list here real quick, there is actually a list of certified um, animals, for service animals, and some of these on here I would have never thought could be a service animal. So give me a second while I pull this up. One of them that I know for sure that I thought would be amazing to see out in the public is miniature horses. I know I remember seeing that. So you've got miniature horses that can be trained to be service animals, ferrets that can be trained to be service animals, capuchin monkeys can be trained to be service animals. Boa constrictors can be trained to become a service animal. Parrots and potbelly pigs. Now, but I've heard of some things in regards to potbelly pigs and how they're just really smart. So it doesn't surprise me that they can be service animals. The same thing kind of goes with the horses, but I was thrown off that they classified miniature horses. But a boa constrictor being a service animal is something that I'm definitely going to look into, and maybe we can cover on next week's segment and a YouTube video and see how that actually works. I'm really interested to see how a boa constrictor can help a person in regards to maybe mobility or retrieving things for someone. If somebody can teach a boa constrictor how to fetch, that would be awesome. So, we'll cover that on next week's segment, and look at some of the abilities these animals are able to perform. And one of these next coming weeks, hopefully, I'll be able to go live in person with a trainer so you guys can actually see these trainers in work, and their hard work in teaching these wonderful animals how to help people with disabilities. So it's really amazing. Um, and I know earlier we mentioned a little bit about the Fair Housing Act, but I kind of want to touch bases on some information. This information I'm giving you, when I share information like this, comes either directly from a .gov site or comes from directly from the ADA site. Keep in mind there are a lot of sites out there that offer information in regards to service animals, whether they be therapy, companion, or service animals. But a lot of them don't get updated timely or have information directly related to a state that they reside in. So you want to make sure that unless you're dealing with a .org or a .gov site, um, releasing information about these wonderful animals, that you're going directly through the ADA. Even though therapy animals and support animals are not covered underneath the ADA guidelines, they have a broad layout on what is classified as an ADA or as a therapy dog or a companion animal dog too as well. So be sure to stick to those sources. That's one thing I want to make sure that you guys are aware of. So if there's information that you want to know, please drop it into the comment box while we're live still here so I can get back to them. But just know that all the information that I am sharing with you is coming from reputable sites such as .gov or the ADA website. So we've got the Fair Housing Act. So one thing about the service dogs that I mentioned before is that you cannot be denied that. These are some of the stipulations that come directly from the HUD site that dictate, how those guidelines are written out. Providers cannot refuse to make reasonable accommodations and rules, policies, practices, or services when such accommodation may be necessary to afford a person with a disability the equal opportunity to use while enjoying a dwelling. So essentially, they cannot refuse you from being able to move into your home because you have a support animal. They can't refuse you because you've got a service animal, or they can't refuse you because you got a therapy animal that performs a job at multiple facilities. Um, if the request was made to a housing provider by or for a person's disability, they cannot deny you for it. The request was supported by a reliable disability related information. So essentially, like a doctor's letter from your doctor stating what the disabilities may be performed. I'm not exactly how sure how HUD outlines that in regards to being able to provide that kind of sensitive information or what information they need to provide, but they if a request was made, that there's a supported information to prove that you have a disability and need for this service animal. And then it also says if the disability and the disability related need for the animals were not apparent and the housing provider requests such as information or request information. So for instance, if you have a home and you need a ramp, they cannot deny you those services underneath the Fair Housing Act to install those services onto your home to make sure that you're comfortable in your home and getting in and out. Same thing goes with dogs as well. Um, it says right here, let me read this again. Uh, the housing provider has if they cannot demonstrate the following things, then they can't deny you. So that granting the request would impose undue financial and administrative burden on the housing providers. Um, so essentially, like if your front door is like 15 steps up, so it would take like I don't know 100 yards worth of ramp. If it doesn't bankrupt the housing owner to do that, then they have to oblige in providing those amenities or necessities, um, or that the request would fundamentally alter essential nature of the housing provider's operations. So you can't be like, all right, well, this house has some stairs. I need you to build a basement around it now because I can't go upstairs. Like I can only go downstairs, or whatever. What? So essentially, if it's doing any kind of change to the home that just doesn't honestly make sense. The specific assistance animals in question would pose a direct threat to the health and safety of others, despite any other reasonable accommodations that could eliminate or reduce that threat. So one of those things would be, I'm assuming, just using this as an example, like fencing. They could deny the request for fencing if the next door neighbor deems that even though you have a service dog who's well trained, it's considered a threat. Um, they're stating that they can deny that. I see this was like if they were actually posing a threat, that they could deny reasonable accommodations that could eliminate or reduce the threat if they found that your animal was a threat in general, which is typically in most cases. Service dogs aren't taught to growl. An actual interesting fact too as well. When talking with Alabama Care Service Dogs, which is the largest ADA approved service training facility here in Alabama, they told me that of all of the types of animals and dogs that they train, they roughly only have about 30% or 32% success rate with animals they train that they will keep and give to individuals with disabilities, because that's how strict and rigorous their training is for these service animals. Uh, Meaning if they bark or they growl during what they call a public access test, they can be kicked out of the program altogether. So that when you're getting these animals, they're really well trained, and they spend I think 6 months to a year training service animals. This is some more information I'm going to go back and get for you guys with my next segment, hopefully being able to do an interview with the trainer. So let's keep an eye out for that. And then the last thing that I wanted to provide to you from the Fair Housing Act as well says that the request would not result in significant physical damage to the property or others, despite any other reasonable accommodations that can eliminate or reduce the physical damage. Um, so essentially, you're telling them, I want you to put a hole in the side of my house. My dog has access to go in and out. Like, I don't want a service dog door. I just want a hole. No, we don't want you damaging the property in order to service your animal, your support animal or therapy animal. So, these are all reasonable accommodations that they have outlined on the Fair Housing Act, surrounding having service animals and dogs. So just know that if you're in the process of moving, looking to move, but you're worried about bringing your companion animal, just reach out to your physician. Reach out to, if you're seeing a counselor, a licensed clinical worker, a therapist, or psychiatrist, get them to write the letter for you. Um, if they can write the letter for you, then it allows you so much more opportunities in regards to moving or taking your pets places. Um, and it just makes things easier for you because the less mental stress you have to worry about, the better that your day can be. So I just want to say to everybody, thank you guys so much for coming into this segment. I'm going to have a lot more to talk about on next week's segments, surrounding service animals, their guidelines, like the name of the certifications, and let you know how you can actually train your own service animal without having to take them to school too as well. So stay tuned for that next podcast. Thank y'all so much for tuning in, and I'll see you next week.